Despite the hatred and anger of the radical left lunatics who want to destroy our country, we will make America great again.
What is a radical left Democrat? What have Democrats ever done that could be described as radical, and where, indeed, did that phrase come from? So I thought we'd spend a few moments just trying to discover the origins of this claim that Democrats are radical and try and address the balance with the MAGA Republicans that make these claims. Now, firstly, it's very clear to me that the phrase a radical leftist Democrat was created by Donald Trump, projecting the criticism of him as a radical back onto the Democrats. This is what Trump does. He rejects something, he rinses it, and he repeats it. So there's two things here. First, that the Democrats actually aren't radical, and second, that Trump reverses the criticism and repeats it enough to make it stick. Only it's not true. Let me give you an example. The US and most civilized Western countries had a plan in place in case there was a worldwide pandemic. And because scientists predicted that it was a real threat, when it actually happened, people refused to believe it because they hadn't been told that this might happen, even though the government and the officials did. And as the threat increased and the medical advice evolved, people, Republicans, refused to accept the changing guidance, like masking and eventually vaccinating, because their populist cult leader lied about it and said it would go away. And why? Because it was an election year, and he didn't want to be distracted by a pandemic. He wanted to win the election. And so one of the world's most respected public health experts became a target of hate, and the phrase "Fire Fauci" became a thing. That's radical. Didn't come from the Democrats. It just came from Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans. And then the MAGA people branded Democrats radical for heeding public health advice that was circulating all over the world, even though 1 million people eventually died from the virus in the USA. Vaccines weren't mandated, they were recommended. Again, not radical, normal, in every country. GOP senators now are saying that they are increasingly being confronted by constituents who buy into these discredited conspiracy theories, such as the claim that Democrats stole the 2020 presidential election or that federal agents incited the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol. This is all radical conspiracy theories created by Donald Trump and his surrogates. Growing distrust with government institutions, from the FBI and the CIA and the DOJ to the Centers for Disease Control and National Institutes of Health. It makes it much more difficult for Republican lawmakers to actually govern because this party of Reagan has transformed into the party of Trump. And to the dismay of some veteran Republican lawmakers, it doesn't look like it's going to go back to how it was anytime soon. And whilst President Biden, who came out of retirement to face off fascism, delivers for the American people, not for himself, but for the people, these extremists, the House Republicans, are consumed by chaos and marching the country towards a government shutdown that would damage communities and the economy and national security. But they don't care, because it's all about using these radical moments to point towards Democrats failing, when really it's all coming from the Republican side. And instead of following the bipartisan example of Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, extreme House Republicans continue to demand a reckless laundry list of partisan proposals as a condition of keeping the government open from an evidence-free impeachment of Joe Biden that even some of their own members don't agree with, to reckless cuts to programs that millions of hardworking families and seniors count on, to a litany of other extraneous ideological demands. The Republican Party is radicalizing against democracy. This is the central political fact of our moment. Instead of organizing its coalition around shared policy goals, the GOP has chosen to emphasize hatred and fear of its political opponents, who they warn will destroy their supporters and the country and take your guns away and force you to have an abortion, none of which is true. And so the Biden era of American politics is shaping up as a war between democratic norms and the intensifying opposition of a political minority that has proved willing to engage in violence in order to hold on to power. Now, this fight ultimately isn't just about policy. It's about whether the US will live up to the promise of democracy. And on that crucial question, we've rarely been so divided. Big waves of reform and reconstruction in America have generally required massive political majorities. Congressional Reconstruction marked a second founding of the nation and the first attempt to create a multiracial democracy. It relied on supermajorities in both houses, the most radical supermajority in American history. The New Deal and the Great Society also harnessed congressional supermajorities to achieve enormous, lasting legislative change. And these events are looked back upon as radical, but as positive change that was bipartisan, that required everybody to be on board, something that we just can't even imagine today. I mean, was the Civil Rights Act an act of radicalism? Was giving women the right to choose in 1973 radical? I mean, at the time, yeah, but in hindsight, no. Unless you are a religious radical or far-right Christian nationalist who takes the Bible literally, like Speaker Mike Johnson, or maybe someone who just doesn't think that women or black people should be equal in society. You know, as debates over abortion continue in states around the country, the majority of Americans, polled time after time, continue to say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. It's only radicalized Republican lawmakers who say otherwise, invariably old, white men. And people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are branded radical because they bring forward climate change legislation. The Green New Deal, 3 words that nobody wants to say for fear of being branded radical. Meanwhile, the US is the second biggest polluter on the planet. The temperature of the earth is rising every single day, and all civilized, intelligent countries around the world are taking steps to reduce carbon emissions. And yet MAGA Republicans think, oh, it's nothing to worry about, and they say that Democrats are radical because they want to stop drilling oil and start using the power of the sun or wind for energy. I mean, come on, this is a whole planet. It's not just one country. In December 2015, 195 states signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement, one of the most important pacts for international cooperation on tackling climate change. And countries are actually taking steps to deliver on it. The UK and France and New Zealand, some of the countries that have legally committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. I mean, in the UK, where I'm from, you can't drive your car without paying 10 or 20 or 30 pounds a day for climate change initiatives. It's just now baked in. And unless you drive electric, that's just the cost. You know, Donald Trump removed the US from the Paris Climate Accord. And as soon as Joe Biden got back in, he re-signed the agreement. As soon as he took the presidency. Crucial time was lost because Donald Trump politicized climate change. Radical? Seems like it to me. Donald Trump's also promised to ban all Muslims again entering the US if he regains the presidency. Think about that. Banning an entire religion, 2 billion Muslims on the planet, banned from entering the USA. Why? No reason. Just xenophobia, racism, hate. Again, another notch on the Republican radical post. And finally, let's talk about the people being radicalized to worship a cult leader. Donald Trump is worshipped by MAGA Republicans like a god, even though he did nothing to improve their lives. Democrats don't worship Joe Biden. They acknowledge that he's doing his best, but they also acknowledge his faults. And they also know that the greater objective is fighting fascism, choosing democracy over dictatorship. Joe Biden and the Democrats want everybody to vote. Is that radical? Republicans want to stifle voting because it's their only chance of winning. So remember, when MAGA Republicans refer to Democrats as radical, they are simply projecting their own extremism onto the other side, because deep down, all they crave is power and white patriarchal supremacy. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5 Minute News podcast. Download it wherever you get yours and have me tell you what's happening around the world while you make your morning coffee. You can also catch my videos, my explainer videos, and my weekend show long-form interview program here on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, but also don't forget to join. And by clicking join, from just $2.99 a month, you can become part of the 5 Minute News community. Join me for live Q&As and communicate with me whenever you like as an exclusive member of 5 Minute News.